Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing that every single American, including you, owes over $100,000. Not on a credit card, not on a mortgage, but as part of something much bigger, the United States national debt. Right now, the U.S. government owes more than $34 trillion. That's trillion with a T, a number so massive it's almost impossible to fully grasp. In this video, we're going to break it all down in a way that actually makes sense, what the U.S. national debt really is, how it got this big, who America owes money to, and most importantly, what it means for you, your future, and the future of the country. Because this isn't just about numbers or economics. This is about the direction of the United States itself. Let's start simple. The national debt is the total amount of money the U.S. government has borrowed and still needs to pay back. Think of it like this. If the U.S. government were a person, it would be someone who consistently spends more money than they earn and makes up the difference by borrowing. Every year, the government spends on things like Social Security, Medicare, the military, infrastructure, education, and emergency programs. But here's the key issue. The government usually spends more than it collects in taxes. That difference is called a deficit. And when deficits happen year after year, they don't just disappear. They stack up. Over time, that accumulation becomes what we call the national debt. Now let's put this number into perspective. $34 trillion is not just a lot of money. It's a completely different scale. It's bigger than the entire economies of many countries combined and equals over $100,000 for every American citizen. If you try to count to 34 trillion one number per second, it would take you over 1,000,000 years. That's longer than human civilization has existed. Another way to understand it. If the U.S. paid $1 million every single day, it would still take more than 90,000 years to fully pay off the debt. This is not a normal financial situation. This is historically massive and unprecedented in scale. So how did the United States end up with this level of debt? It didn't happen overnight. It built up over decades due to multiple factors. First, wars and defense spending played a huge role. From World War II to more recent conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, military operations have cost trillions of dollars, and the U.S. continues to maintain one of the largest defense budgets in the world. Second, tax cuts have also contributed. While lowering taxes can stimulate economic growth, it also reduces the government's income, and if spending doesn't decrease at the same time, borrowing fills the gap. Third, social programs like Social Security and Medicare are essential for millions of Americans, but they are also extremely expensive, especially as the population ages and more people retire. Finally, major crises have significantly accelerated the debt. The 2008 financial crisis required massive government intervention, and the COVID-19 pandemic led to trillions of dollars in emergency spending, including stimulus checks, business support, and unemployment benefits. All of this was necessary to stabilize the economy, but it was largely funded through borrowing. Now you might be wondering, who exactly does the U.S. owe all this money to? The answer is more complex than most people think. A large portion of the debt is actually owed domestically, meaning to American investors, banks, pension funds, and even the Federal Reserve. In other words, Americans owe money to Americans. At the same time, foreign countries also hold a significant share of U.S. debt. Nations like China, Japan, and the United Kingdom buy U.S. Treasury bonds because they are considered one of the safest investments in the world. This global demand for U.S. debt is one of the reasons the system continues to function. So why should this matter to you personally? The impact is more direct than you might think. First, interest payments on the debt are rising rapidly. The U.S. government now spends hundreds of billions of dollars each year just paying interest, and that number is growing. This is money that could have been used for healthcare, education, or infrastructure, but instead goes towards servicing debt. Second, higher taxes could become a reality in the future if the government needs more revenue to manage its obligations. Third, there's the risk of inflation. When governments rely on printing money or increasing the money supply, it can reduce the value of currency, meaning your money buys less over time. Everyday costs like groceries, gas, and rent can increase. Finally, there's the broader risk of economic instability. If investors begin to lose confidence in the U.S. economy, borrowing could become more expensive, potentially leading to serious financial challenges. This brings us to the big question. Is the United States going bankrupt? The answer is not straightforward. Unlike regular countries, the U.S. has a unique advantage because it controls its own currency, the U.S. dollar, which also serves as the world's primary reserve currency. This gives the U.S. the ability to borrow more easily than most nations. However, this does not mean there are no limits. Excessive debt can still slow economic growth, increase inflation, and reduce global confidence in the U.S. financial system. So while bankruptcy in the traditional sense is unlikely, the risks associated with high debt levels are very real. Looking ahead, there are several possible paths the U.S. could take. One option is to cut government spending, but this is politically difficult because it often involves reducing popular programs. Another option is to raise taxes, which is also controversial. A more optimistic path is economic growth. If the economy grows faster than the debt, the overall burden becomes more manageable. This is generally considered the best-case scenario. Another possibility is using inflation to reduce the real value of the debt, but this approach can negatively impact everyday Americans by increasing living costs. At the end of the day, the national debt is not just a government issue. It affects your daily life and your future. It can influence your cost of living, your taxes, job opportunities, and overall economic stability. However, it's important to understand that this situation does not automatically lead to disaster. The United States still has one of the strongest economies in the world, along with significant global influence and financial stability. But the decisions made today will play a major role in shaping the future for the next generation. So the next time you hear that the U.S. is $34 trillion in debt, don't just think of it as a number. Think of it as a story about how a nation chooses to spend, invest, and plan for the future. Because the real question isn't just how big the debt is. The real question is what America is going to do about it. And that decision will ultimately define the future of the United States.